Hello everyone, and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley, and the Commander's Forge is an area for me to talk about Magic, Commander, and basically anything else as we try and put, well, essentially my mental health in front of gaming. Now, this week I could go in and talk about all of the cards from Innistrad Crimson Vow, but I'm not going to do that because set reviews are exhaustive and there's so many of them. You don't need 27,000 people telling you what cards you should be putting where. So instead, I'm just going to look through and tell you what cards I'm excited for. Essentially for one deck. And they all have like one thing in common. They're either a wolf or a werewolf. That's right, we're talking about upgrades for Tovolar because we got new werewolves. And the first one that I want to talk about is Ill-Tempered Loner. Ill-Tempered Loner is a 3/3 human werewolf for 2 red. And it says whenever Ill-Tempered Loner is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target. Not bad. And it has bad fire breathing, which means it has 1 in a red to get +2/+0 till end of turn. And then it has the Daybound, and the other side is Nightbound. Well, on the Nightbound side, it is the Halpak Avenger. It is a 4/4, and whenever a permanent you control is dealt damage, Halpak Avenger deals that much damage to any target. And again, it has the bad fire breathing for 1 in a red for +2/+0. So it goes from a fairly decent card to an amazing card, especially in Tovolar where you want to constantly be attacking with wolves and werewolves. Now if they block, you just get to sling extra damage wherever you see fit. It's one of the things I've found looking at the Crimson Vow werewolves and wolves is I've noticed they've started edging out some of the original wolves and werewolves from the before times that were still good enough for the deck, but since they didn't synergize with the original, with the new Daybound, Nightbound, were in the deck more for filler, and stuff from the set's definitely going to end up changing out for that. And that's just kind of the way deck evolution is going. Yeah. Either way, the next one is the Volatile Arsonist, which we did talk about last week, but as a refresher, it's 3 red, 4/4 human werewolf. It has Menace and Haste, and when it attacks, it deals 1 damage to each of 1 target creature, 1 target player, and or up to 1 target planeswalker. On the Daybound side, and on the Nightbound side, it has Menace and Haste, and when it attacks, it deals 2 damage to a creature, a player, and a planeswalker. And he's a 5/5. Again, just a very decent werewolf, and I feel like we're going to end up putting a little more mana intensive stuff in that deck, and I apologize for that. Well, to myself anyway. But the next one is cheaper. It is a single green, and it is just a wolf. But Ascendant Pack Leader is a 2/1 for a single green. When it enters the battlefield, with a +1/+1 counter on it, if you control a permanent with mana value 4 or greater, which is not going to be hard to do in this deck. And whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, you put a counter on the pack leader, which, again, is not going to be hard to do. Tovolar does synergize with wolves and werewolves, so, again, just stuff for Tovolar. Stuff like Averbrook Caretaker. 4 green for a 4/4 human werewolf with Hexproof. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control on the Daybound side, and on the Nightbound side, it is Howlhenge Huntmaster. It is a 6/6 werewolf with hexproof. Other permanents you control have hexproof. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Again, just kind of re-solidifying our we want to play creatures and then buff them and then swing them and hit people and draw cards. And then there's the Cemetery Prowler, 1 green for a 3/4 wolf. Vigilance: when Cemetery Prowler enters the battlefield or attacks, exile a card from a graveyard. And spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card type they are that share a type with a card exiled with Cemetery Reaper. I read that really bad, but basically if you exile a creature, your creatures now cost 1 less. The same is true for any other type of card. And yeah, it just we got some new toys for Tovolar. It just we got more wolves and werewolves. Halpak Piper is 3 and a green for a 2/2 human werewolf that the spell can't be countered, and you can pay 1 and a green and tap it to put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If it's a wolf or a werewolf, you can untap the Piper and activate this only as a sorcery. That's the daybound side. And on the nightbound side, it's a 4/4 called Wild Song Howler. And whenever this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into the Howler, you look at the top 6 cards of your library and you may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. You put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And there's just a couple more I want to talk about. The first one being Weaver of Blossoms. Weaver of Blossoms is a 2/3 human werewolf for 2 and a green. It taps to add 1 mana of color to your mana pool on the daybound side. That's it. Fairly simple. And on the nightbound side, it is Blossom-Clad Werewolf. It is a 3/4, and it taps to add 2 mana of any one color. It's just an on-theme mana dork in a very mana-hungry deck. And yeah, that's about all there is to say about it. And then we're going to round out the new stuff that I want for the deck with Child of the Pack, which, if you look at the art, is basically Little Red Riding Hood. But Child of the Pack is a 2/5 human werewolf for 2, a red and a green. And you can pay 2 a red and a green to create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. There is no tapping involved with that, so as long as you have any multiples of 4 mana, you can make wolves at instant speed. There is no at sorcery speed clause here on the daybound side. And then on the nightbound side, it is Savage Packmate, 5/5 werewolf, trample. Other creatures you control get +1/+0. Fairly simple. Make creatures when it flips. Make creatures bigger. Yeah, that's about all I got for stuff I want to add to Tovolar. And I'll be right back. Hey, I just want to take a minute to tell you about my Patreon. I know times are hard for everybody, and I know it isn't easy to shuffle around bills and stuff. Believe me, I know that. But if you would like to help support the podcast and me, you can find the links to my Patreon in my link tree, which is always put into the description of either the video or the audio, wherever you're listening to it. It would really mean the world to me. Honestly, I'm just struggling to make ends meet most weeks. But that's it. That's all. If you want to help, the links will be where you can find them. And we're back. And I totally didn't lose the several hours of recording time because I had to go help my brother move a TV. That totally didn't happen. You have no proof. Either way, let's talk about a new deck I built. a deck built around Tuya Bearclaw. Tuya Bearclaw is a 2/2 human warrior for 1, a red and a green, and whenever Tuya attacks, it gets +X/+X till end of turn, where X is the greatest power among other creatures you control. Now, me being the sadistic man I am, said, you know what has big power and toughness? That's right, Noodle Boys. We went Eldrazi. And it's not pure Eldrazi. We do have some stuff like some utility legendaries, stuff like Urbrask the Hidden, 4/4 for 3 red, Praetor, but he gives creatures you control haste, and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield attappeted. And then Grand Warlord Rada is a 3/4 for 2, a red and a green. She's an elf warrior with haste, but whenever one or more creatures you control attack, add that much mana in any combination of red and or green. Until end of turn, you don't lose mana as steps and phases end. As you can imagine, Eldrazi cost a lot of mana. Then we have Ilharg the Raiseborer. A 6/6 for 3 red, is a boar god. Has trample, and whenever Ilharg the Raiseborer attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Return that creature to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. And whenever Ilharg the Raiseborer dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you may put it into its owner's library, 3 from the top. The fun interaction with Ilharg and Tuya is you can stack the abilities. So you can put a big ol' Eldrazi into play and then have Tuya get its power and toughness. You don't get cast triggers from putting Eldrazi into play, but who cares? Yeah, so that's... and then our quote-unquote next lieutenant, as I've been taking to calling them, is Morag, Furia Vicum. 6/6 for 4 red. He's a Minotaur warrior. Each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn, and has landfall whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. If it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of combat, untap all creatures you control. Whew, yeah, those are some big beefy boys themselves. Now, when I was looking through the deck, and we'll get to the noodly boys in a minute, I kind of noticed, like, there's not a whole lot of things giving them haste, and there's not a whole lot giving them trample, which they're big, beefy creatures. We want to give things trample, especially our commander. So as far as trample goes, I opted for a Scarred Guildmage. It's a 2/2 for a red and a green human shaman. And you can pay a red and a green to give creatures you control trample till end of turn. It also has another ability where you can pay 1, a red and a green, and target land you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature until end of turn. It's still a land. Next up, we have Kenra Charioteer. 3/3 for 1, a red and a green. Jackal warrior. It has trample, and other creatures you control have trample. Then we have the Archetype of Aggression. 3/2 for 1 red, human warrior. Creatures you control have trample, and creatures your opponents control lose trample and can't have or gain trample. Again, it's only like 3 out of 100 cards, but it's nice insurance to have. Now, on the side of haste, one of the first things we're running is Rhythm of the Wilds, and this plays double duty. It's an enchantment for 1, a red and a green, and creature spells you control can't be countered. That's very good. But then, non-token creatures you control have Riot. That means when they enter, you have a choice. You can either put a +1/+1 counter on them, ergo making Tuya 1 toughness or power and toughness bigger, or they get haste. And big ol' hasty noodly boys is what we're after. Then we have Fires of Yavamaya. Enchantment for 1 red and green. Creatures you control have haste, and you can sacrifice Fires of Yavamaya to give target creature +2/+2 till end of turn. And then there's the one that's kind of in here because it's tied to Tuya's ability. At its very base, it has 5 power. It's Cyclops of Eternal Fury. It's a 5/3 for 4 red, Cyclops, and creatures you control have haste. it's just it really seals in that like nice Doom flavor when people just kind of see a Noodle Boy come down and then you can immediately attack with it and pump to you and have them have trample. It's a wonderful thing. One of the things I kind of tackled when I was building the deck is how am I going to keep my hand full? And I figured this deck is going to have just a metric ton of ramp. And believe me, it does have a metric ton of ramp. So I figured a 7-mana enchantment wouldn't be a bad idea. And that enchantment is Zendikar Resurgent. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. And that, again, plays double duty. It's a card draw spell, but it's also more mana. And then Return of the Wild Speaker is an instant for and a green, where you choose one. You either draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, which is what we're going to choose 9 times out of 10, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 till end of turn. And if we just have a board of Noodly Boys and they have trample from something, we just cast that and win. Yeah, good times. Alright, I've teased it long enough. We're going to talk about some Noodly Boys. And I feel like we can't talk about Noodly Boys without talking about the 300-foot tall elephant in the room. And those are the big boys. The big Eldrazi's. The titans of the Eldrazi's. And that starts with Ulamog. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger is 10 mana for a 10/10 Eldrazi. When you cast Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, exile 2 target permanents, has indestructible, and whenever Ulamog attacks, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of his or her library. Oh, such music to my ears. But if you look back in history, you'll see that Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, or Gyre, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it at this particular moment, because my brain no work. 11 mana for a 10/10 Eldrazi. When you cast Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, destroy target permanent. It has Annihilator 4. Annihilator is a fun thing that whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 4 permanents in this case. And then whenever Ulamog is put into the graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library. Good times. Next up, we have the Koslic. Starting with Koslic, the Great Distortion. He is 8 and 2 colorless, to very specifically the diamond-shaped colored mana. Or colorless, you know what I mean. He is a 12/12, and when you cast Cozleg the Great Distortion, if you have fewer than 7 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. Of course, this means if it's the last card in your hand when you cast it, you just draw 7 cards. But then he has Menace, or Menace as we call it around here, and you can discard a card with converted mana cost X to counter a target spell with converted mana cost X. Which, when a lot of your deck has like 10, 11, and 12 mana value permanents, doesn't happen a ton, but occasionally I can counter a 3-drop. That leads us into the next Koslic, Butcher of Truth. 10 mana for a 12/12 Eldrazi. And when you cast Koslic, Butcher of Truth, draw 4 cards. He also has Annihilator 4, and when Koslic is put into the graveyard from anywhere, he also has the Shuffle Clause. And then we round out the Titans with Emrakul, which unfortunately only one is not banned, but for good reason. But Emrakul the Promised End is 13 mana for a 13/13 Eldrazi, but Emrakul costs 1 less to cast for each card type among card types in your graveyard. And when you cast Emrakul, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn, and it has flying, trample, and protection from instants. So it's just big old noodly boys. And then we kind of round out our Eldrazi with stuff like Pathrazer of Ulamog. It's an 11 mana 9/9 Eldrazi with Annihilator 3. And it can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. Spawnsire of Ulamog is just... It's one of my favorite ones. Because it's a 10 mana 7/11. Which just... I just love calling it my 7/11. But Eldrazi, Annihilator 1, and you can pay 4 to put 2 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens onto the battlefield. They have sacrifice this creature, add 1 to your mana pool. There's also an ability on here that doesn't technically work in Commander, but it's 20. And then you can cast any number of Eldrazi cards you own from outside the game without paying their mana costs. The way outside the game works, there isn't technically one in Commander, but, you know, it's a 7-Eleven that can make little snacks. Then we have everyone's favorite You Can't Even, which is also known as Void Winnower. It's a 9 mana 11/9 Eldrazi. Your opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana costs, and your opponents can't block with creatures with even converted mana costs. 'Tis annoying to play against, I know, and the only reason it's in this deck is that it is an Eldrazi. That's the only reason. We round that out with It That Betrays, 12 mana 11/11 Annihilator 2. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto the battlefield under your control. This just synergizes mostly with Annihilator in this deck because they're sacrificing permanents to it. And then the last one I'm going to talk about for Eldrazi is Conduit of Ruin. It's a 6 mana for a 5/5 Eldrazi. But when you cast Conduit of Ruin, you may search your library for a colorless creature card with converted mana cost 7 or greater, reveal it, shuffle your library, put that card on top of it, and then the first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. Yeah, there's some noodly boys. Now, the main reason I built the deck this way was actually just because, A, I had the lands. The lands being Eldrazi Temple, Sanctum of Ugin, and Eye of Ugin, respectively. Eldrazi Temple either taps for a colorless or taps for 2 to cast Eldrazi spells or activate Eldrazi abilities. Sanctum of Ugin taps for 1 colorless mana, but whenever you cast a colorless spell for mana cost 7 or greater, you can sacrifice it. If you do, your turn, you search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. And Eye of Ugin is a legendary land that just says Eldrazi spells cost 2 less to cast, but you can also pay 7 and tap it to search your library for a colorless creature, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. But the true card, the true piece de resistance that made me build this deck, I have a foil Old Border Ancient Stirrings. Single green mana, sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a colorless card from among them and put it into your hand. Then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Now, normally, in any other deck, you're basically just trying to hit a land with this. But in my deck, I can hit a land, a planeswalker, one of like 15 to 20 creatures. And it's fun time. It does powerful stuff, but I don't think it's in any way an overpowered deck. I think it could be if I really buckled down on the mana side of things, but I don't really see Tuya being a CEDH deck anytime soon. But yeah, I think that's going to do it. I think I have reached my limit. Mainly for dogs barking in the background and having to restart several times. That said, I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. The logo for the podcast was created by Nate and Erica Jacobs, and the music used was provided for use by Cody Malpe and Ian Foss of The Crypt. You can find their music online by searching for The Crypt, and I must recommend them if you enjoy heavy music. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.